The Indiana Fever were never supposed to be in this position. A team that had been written off, laughed at, and dismissed as irrelevant just a year ago, suddenly found themselves standing in the middle of one of the most heated playoff battles the WNBA had seen in years. The odds were stacked against them. The Las Vegas Aces, a team built like a dynasty with stars at every position, were supposed to roll through the postseason with ease. They had experience, championships, and swagger. But what they didn't account for was how much grit, heart, belief the Fever carried with them into the postseason. From the opening tip, it was clear the Fever weren't intimidated. Aaliyah Boston was commanding the paint like it belonged to her. Every rebound she grabbed, every block she swatted away, carried the weight of an entire franchise that had been mocked and disrespected for too long. Fans had doubted whether she could stand tall against a powerhouse like the Aces. But Boston wasn't just holding her own, she was dominating. On offense, she finished with the kind of footwork that drew comparisons to the legends of the game. While on defense, she made the lane look like a no-fly zone. It was her presence that set the tone for everything else that unfolded beside her. Caitlin Clark was doing what she has done all season, breaking the game wide open. She was fearless, pulling up from deep, threading passes through impossible windows, and dictating the tempo of the game. When the Fever needed a bucket, it was Clark who delivered. When they needed a spark, it was Clark who lit the fire. But what made this game different was that the Fever weren't just riding on Clark's shoulders. This was a collective effort, a team that had grown through months of adversity. Criticism and tension finally rising together when it mattered most. And make no mistake, there had been tension. Sheryl Swoopes had stirred the pot earlier in the year when she threw out her now infamous comments about Caitlin Clark, questioning whether the rookie phenom's impact was real or just hype. Those comments lit a fuse, not only in Clark, but across the entire Fever roster. They knew the world was watching, waiting for them to crumble, waiting for the narrative to shift back to the Aces, the Liberty, or any of the established powers. Instead, the Fever used the doubt as fuel, and on this night against Las Vegas, all came pouring out. The Fever's defense was relentless. Kelsey Mitchell hounded the perimeter, disrupting the Aces' rhythm. Boston battled in the trenches with A'ja Wilson, refusing to back down even for a second. And every time the Aces tried to pull away, Clark would answer with a dagger three or a fearless drive to the rim. The game turned into a tug-of-war, with momentum swinging wildly from one side to the other. But there was a different kind of energy radiating from Indiana, belief that no matter what the Aces threw at them, it could take the punch and swing right back. What stood out most was the chemistry. A few months ago, critics said the Fever locker room was divided, that the mix of young stars and veterans wasn't working. But against the Aces, you could see the unity. When Boston blocked a shot, Clark was the first to scream and clap in her face. When Clark buried a deep three, Mitchell and Smith were right there pumping her up. They weren't just playing for themselves anymore, they were playing for each other. That bond was what made them dangerous. As the fourth quarter ticked away, the game became a battle of wills. Every possession was a war. The Aces leaned on Wilson and Chelsea Gray, trying to use their championship experience to pull away. But the Fever kept clawing back, possession after possession, play after play. Boston muscled in a tough layup through contact. Clark hit a step-back three that sent the Fever bench into a frenzy. The crowd was on edge, the energy electric, and for the first time in years, Indiana basketball felt alive again. The narrative shifted right before our eyes. No longer were the Fever the young, inexperienced team trying to figure things out. They were a force to be reckoned with, standing toe-to-toe with the champions of the league and refusing to blink. The Aces, who had come in with all the swagger, suddenly looked rattled. They weren't used to being challenged like this. Not by Indiana. Not by a team they had once brushed off as irrelevant. But the Fever had changed. They had evolved into something greater than anyone expected. Aaliyah Boston's dominance couldn't be ignored. She wasn't just playing well, she was playing like a cornerstone, the kind of player you could build a dynasty around. She controlled the pace, she anchored the defense, and she inspired her teammates with every tough play she made. And Caitlin Clark, with her deep threes and fearless drives, was proving once again that the hype wasn't hype at all, it was reality. She wasn't just a star in the making. She was already one of the most dangerous players in the league, and she was doing it in her first postseason run. As the final minutes approached, it was clear this was more than just a game. This was a statement. Every possession told the story of a team that had been doubted, disrespected, and underestimated. Now, standing on equal ground with one of the greatest teams in WNBA history, the Fever weren't just surviving, they were thriving. They were rewriting the narrative in real time, and the basketball world had no choice but to pay attention. When the final buzzer sounded, the Fever had done what few believed possible. They hadn't just competed with the Aces, they had outplayed them in stretches, exposed their weaknesses, and forced the defending champions to respect them. The box score would show Boston's double-double and Clark's scoring explosion. But the real story was bigger than numbers. It was about belief, resilience, and the undeniable truth that the Fever had arrived. For Aaliyah Boston, this was a coming-of-age moment. For Caitlin Clark, it was another chapter in a rookie season that has already redefined what's possible. For the Fever as a franchise, it was validation that the rebuild, the struggles, the criticism, it had all been worth it. And for the fans who had waited so long to see their team back in the spotlight, it was a night they would never forget. Even Sheryl Swoopes' controversial comments took on a new life in the aftermath. What was once meant to diminish Clark had now become part of the fuel that drove her and her team to rise higher. The tension, the noise, the doubts, they didn't break the Fever. They forged them into something stronger. And the result was on full display against the Aces. This wasn't just about one game. It was about setting the tone for the future. The Fever showed they could stand toe-to-toe with the league's best, and they did it with a roster that is still growing, still learning, still finding its ceiling. If they could do this now, what would they look like in another year, or 2, or 3? The rest of the WNBA couldn't ignore the message. Indiana isn't just back. They're here to stay. And so the story of the night wasn't about Las Vegas, or about the dynasty that everyone assumed would keep rolling. It was about the underdogs who refused to stay down, the players who carried the weight of disrespect and turned it into fuel, and the young stars who showed that they are ready to lead a new era of basketball. It was about Aaliyah Boston proving she belongs among the elite, Caitlin Clark silencing every critic with her play, and the Indiana Fever reminding the world that belief, heart, and resilience can change everything.